All right, now when it comes to chopping this, if we were going to really mince this fine, when we hit it and smacked it the first time, you could have hit it harder, and that's going to help pulverize it a little bit. So if you hit this really hard, you can see it breaks apart the clove into these little chunks. And so that could be a goal of it. You could just grab it up and gather it up. Again, using that proper form we were talking about in lecture, your knife being at a 45-degree angle in front of you, your other hand like a claw with the thumb tucked in, using it as a guide, rocking on the tip of your knife, chopping into the garlic. Or possibly, pivoting on the tip of the knife, but putting the knife parallel to your body. This is a lot of times the motion we use to chop. I'm using my left hand, not to really hold the knife, but to steady it, and just kind of chopping right through it, working away from me, kind of pushing away from me as I'm doing it. So we had a lot of garlic lovers here. Anybody not like it when you get a chunk of garlic in your food? You like the flavor, but you don't like to bite into a big chunk? All right. Well, then we have another tip here. And what we'll do is we'll start to grind this into a paste using some kosher salt. The kosher salt is kind of coarse in texture, and what it does is it kind of acts like an abrasive or a grit in with the garlic and helps crush it up and release some of the juices. Yeah, and you can continue with this to get it as fine as you want, but we'll move a portion of that to the side, and we'll talk about that paste. So here I have some kosher salt. We're just going to kind of sprinkle this in. Certainly it's adding salt to this, but the purpose of it is not to season it, but to use it as, again, kind of like an abrasive. And then moving to the side of the cutting board where my handle can hang off the side of the cutting board, I'm going to work into the garlic, and both of my hands are moving at the same time with the knife. That's how you keep control of it. It's not one's moving separately from the other. That's how you're going to end up cutting yourself. But just working into it, smashing it with the side of the knife, and you can start to see how the juices start to come out in the garlic. It gets kind of pasty. You can continue to work with it like that if you want a real fine paste. And that in itself, will give you, help release the flavor and not give you a big chunk. You can see how it's become glossy and it's sticky now. That's the juices coming out from the garlic. Again, that's going to help release the flavor to your food. I want to talk about a couple other things here that we'll have a little bit more hands-on next week. First of all, how many of you like peppers? Kind of hard sometimes to cut a pepper. What we're going to look at is the most efficient way to cut a pepper. And so the real tip here is, we want to take the top and the bottom off. And that way it allows us access to that kind of seed cluster that's in the center. So just with a good sharp knife, and again, you look at my knife, that natural 45-degree angle. I'm always trying to remind myself of that I'm holding my knife correctly. Look right down it, just trim the top off, trim the bottom off. Couple options here. You could just cut straight down around the sides to remove the core, or you can make one slash in the side. Now I'm going to roll the pepper on my knife together, and I can keep my knife right down on that pepper to try to hold it on the cutting board. And I end up taking away the seeds, or most of the seeds, and most of that pith, because again, the pith here is something we look to remove on the pepper. But in thinking about cutting this, now we have a bunch of pepper strips to cut up. Maybe we're going to use them for stir fry. We could take 2 or 3 of these, stack them up. Again, using that same kind of stance where you're a triangle, your knife, your body, and the product, guiding with my knuckles, keeping my thumb tucked in, rocking on the tip of the knife, not necessarily picking up the knife. Sometimes in something that's real high, you have to pick up the knife, but you try not to. So there we have some pepper strips. you know, and then we could certainly turn those one more time, you know, and try to create a dice out of them if we were maybe cutting them up for a salad or something else. The tops, you certainly wouldn't want to throw away, but a lot of times you'll put those aside and come to them later on. Or if I'm doing a large preparation where I have a lot of peppers used for many things, I might use the sides for the strip, dice the tops, and just use those for diced peppers. So, you know, cut those into a couple strips, turn them, you know, concentrate on that claw and the triangular form. So, you know, very quick and easy way to cut a pepper. The key thing here, again, we're looking at safety today. When you're doing your cuts, you're going to make sure that you're holding your knife correctly and that you're pinching the blade, wrapping the rest of your hand around it. You're holding your other hand, whether you're left or right-handed, like a claw. So if you slip, you're not going to cut yourself. And you reduce the chance of you getting injured with that. So let me move these off the cutting board here. I have a... All right, what's this?
Shallots.
All right, this is a shallot. What do you use a shallot for? Because the recipe called for it, right? Okay, well, a shallot has kind of like an onion, garlic-like flavor. It's smaller than an onion. It's used a lot in European cuisine, not just French cuisine. Yeah, just like this is a part of the onion family as well. Anybody know what this is?
Leek.
Is a leek. You know, leeks are also in the onion family. They can all make you cry if they're real harsh and have a lot of sulfur in them. But you know, the leeks themselves are very dirty. But these work great for stews where an onion would cook down to a mush. Yeah, the leek would hold together a little bit better. So we're going to show how to cut these in a variety of different ways. For the shallot, because it's smaller, you might choose to use a paring knife just to trim it up. You know, once you cut the top and the bottom, you can use your paring knife to come at the skin, and remove the papery coating. Yeah, or you can purchase your shallots already peeled just like this, which a lot of people do. But typically what's hard about a shallot is they come in more than one piece. You know, they come into a couple different clusters, and so that's where they kind of get hard to handle. But if you take apart those clusters, now it gives us kind of a flat surface to work with automatically. Yeah, and sometimes you'll change up to a smaller knife, but same techniques that we're going to use for the onion later on is we're going to do what's planks and rods, which means we're going to take our knife and kind of cut, but not all the way through, into like little planks. And if you have a sharp knife, you shouldn't have to put a lot of pressure on it. It's pretty much just pulling your knife through it. You know, and trying to concentrate that you know where your hand is, you know where your knife is at all times. And then we're going to cut now vertical cuts, but again, not cutting all the way through. And then we're going to turn it the last time, just rock on that tip of the knife and slice it. Yeah, so we get like a real fine, almost like a brunoise. Or if this isn't fine enough, we could always chop it down and mince it very fine. That works out well. Or you could just slice your shallots, that same technique, just rocking on the tip of your knife. You know, it's not going to end up being in perfect rounds, but just slice into little pieces. Like garlic, shallots become bitter when they brown. So you do have to be careful when you are working with shallots that if they become too brown, you'll get a bitter flavor from it. You know, unlike onions, if you burn them, they'll become brown, but when you caramelize them and turn them light brown, they'll become more sugary and sweet. So you always want to be conscientious with those when you're dealing with that product. The leek is a little bit different in that it doesn't have the same papery coating on the outside, but boy, are leeks known for being dirty. You know, and so again, like we talked about before, dirt is something we're trying to avoid in our food, and yeah, that's a basic sanitation issue, and certainly could be a physical contaminant in the food that we're producing. But with the leeks in this case, you know, a lot of times people will cut them, cut the bottom end off of it. You know, they are covered with soil while they're growing, you know, and that's what helps keep this a lighter color. It's called blanching, you know, and we'll talk about a different definition for that later on. But you know, what we're interested in is the long stalky portion up to about the first inch above where those leaves come down and form. So you see they form right here. About the first inch above that is the most useful part for us. This could be saved, the top part could be saved for stalks, but whatever we put this in, it's going to turn it that green color. So, you know, brown stalk maybe too much can be overpowering, you know, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and cut these. And my preference is to cut them, then wash them. You know, what happens a lot of times, people will cut them, in half, stand over by the sink and kind of ruffle through them, trying to get the dirt out. And that's really just a waste of a lot of time. What we can do is cut them the way we want to cut them, whether it's just a fine strip or cut them up into a dice, put them in a great volume of water and wash them where all the dirt can settle down in the bottom of the sink, and then let that drain off. And that works out very well for us. So here in this case, and this is looks like a little bit of a tougher leaf, if we were wanting to cut these a little bit on the bias, that means on an angle, we would turn the product parallel to our body. Before we were talking about the triangle, but now we're using that natural 45-degree angle of our wrist. Concentrating on keeping that form, using the claw all the way down to the tip, and when you get down to the last couple pieces, you typically slow down. But now we have some sliced leek that we might be able to use in some soup. For this other leek here, maybe we want to cut this a little bit differently and cut it into strips. In cutting this into strips, we're going to cut this a little bit differently. So I just take it to the lengths I want. I can start to peel apart the layers.